Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be talking about King Khan. It was a major that took place this weekend in France and it was incredible. You have a bunch of invaders coming on down. Some of them did well and some of them did not. Our top 16 finishers are going to be Andres FN, Flo, Maze Beans, and Entei in 13th. Neroz, Apollo Kage, Quick, and MK Big Boss in 9th. In 7th you have Tarek and Orion. 5th is Neo and Kid. 4th is Bloom Forever. 3rd is Raplo. 2nd is Spargo. And in 1st place you got the return of the King, MKLEO. So let's start by talking about some of the underperformances. You're going to have SkyJ finishing in 30. He's going to end up losing to Entei in the winner's side. And you honestly can't feel too bad about that one. He had a really solid run to 13th place and Longo in the loser's side. And those are some tough matches for Incineroar. He's just playing against some of the best characters in the game in Steve and Rob when he is not quite playing a best character in the game. And that's 2 underperformances from SkyJ in a row. 65th at Genesis, 33rd King Kong. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal. You have to remember, he is playing Incineroar. The pendulum is going to swing the other direction at some point, and I'm very confident the pendulum is going to swing back where we see SkyJ in the top 8s again, but it's just very tough to be consistent with this character, and the level of consistency that SkyJ has is honestly incredible. So this is one bad performance that I'm just going to kind of sweep under the rug. You're also going to have Base Mage finishing in 33rd. He's going to end up losing fairly early on to Elfo in the winner's side, and he actually has a pretty solid losers run, most notably taking a massive win over M4E. That is one of the hidden gems of Europe. He's beaten Bloom Forever, and Sephiroth is not a very good character in my opinion, so the fact that he's still able to make him work at the top level is pretty impressive to me, but unfortunately falls to Base Mage. He also beats Anvil before falling to Maze Beans. The Steve did a lot of damage to the invaders this time around, so both SkyJ and Base Mage end up falling for 33rd, and a kind of similar situation to Incineroar. I'd actually say Jigglypuff is worse than Incineroar. The consistency that Base Mage has with this character is honestly incredible, and one subpar performance really isn't that big of a deal. Other underperformances include Mars finishing in 17th. He's going to end up losing to Kid in the winner's side. And we kind of saw this coming with him going to Game 5 with Apple Reviewer at Match Harder A. And Kid is definitely the best Mii Brawler player in the world. Still a very competitive Game 5 set, but Kid manages to eke it out. Then he's going to beat Susu and Ryukai in another very competitive Game 5 set for both of those sets, actually, before ultimately falling to Flo. And I got to shout out Flo because the second day of King Kong was just top 32. Flo, winner's side top 32, DQs because he sleeps through his winner's side matchup, then gets to the tournament, beats Mars, and loses right after that. So he pretty much just beat Mars on that day. Massive props in for that. And yeah, it's definitely an underperformance for Mars, especially when he's been incredible at every other event that he's been to since pretty much 2023. But if he's going to be going to a lot more stuff, which I think he plans on doing, this really isn't going to hurt his resume too much. 17th at a major is still pretty solid, but it's just not the top 8 placement that we kind of expected. And Siski also ended up finishing in 17th place. He's going to pick up wins on Soul Arts and Chunky Kong before losing to MK Big Boss in the winner's side, and then Maze Beans in the loser side. As I kind of mentioned earlier on, the Steves did really well versus the Invaders, but the Steves just did really well at this event. You have 2 of them finishing in 13th place, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But Siski, kind of the same thing as Marn. It's not that big of a deal. He's going to go to more events. He's going to get into the top 8 of lots of those events, but it is a shame that Europe's first major of the year, he does have an underperformance. As I mentioned, I want to talk about the Steve players in the top 32, and this is something that I want to do in kind of every video now. It's just gauge how well Steve is going to be doing and give them a rating of 1 to 10. And in this tournament, you had 2 Steve players in the top 32, both of them finishing in 13th place with Maze Beans and Entei. And I kind of already mentioned the wins that they got, and I'll mention a couple more as we talk about more players because they just happen to beat a lot of people at this tournament. But I would say this was a terrible tournament from Steve. No Steve players in the top 8, and there wasn't an abundance of them in the top 32, but still, 2 13th places is super respectable, and I would give this tournament a 6 out of 10 for the Steve players. And here comes the best part of the video where we get to talk about the low tier runs, and there was a lot of them. You had Peanut Little Mac finishing in 25th place with, you guessed it, Little Mac, and he got a massive upset win over M40. This was another win that we kind of saw coming just because Sephiroth has a really tough time dealing with the space that Little Mac is able to create. As I mentioned, the character is not very good, and he gets overwhelmed extremely easily, even if it's just from the ground. Little Mac just has such good frame rate and such good mobility that it's just a very tough time. It's a Game 5 set, so it wasn't a blowout, but Peanut does end up winning it. He takes a game off Bloom Forever as well, and then beats Bacchus or Batchus, I'm not actually super sure how you say it, to get into the top 32, and then once in the top 32 has the misfortune of playing Neo right away, but still amazing run from Peanut. The stuff that he's able to do with Little Mac, who's arguably the worst character in the game, in a lot of people's eyes, is absolutely incredible. He is by far the best. Territory is also very good, but Peanut is just built different. You also have Chunky Kong finishing in 17th place. He beat Susu in the winner's side before falling to Siski, as I mentioned earlier, but then he beat both Modsai and Iko before falling to Entei, and kind of like I mentioned earlier with Peanut, not as extreme because Donkey Kong is an okay character, but he is just so incredible, and both Peanut and Chunky Kong are extremely technical players, which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. They should be playing the Ooga Booga characters, but they're really smart with their play. The decision making is incredible out of them, and that's the reason that they're able to get so far in these tournaments, because fundamentally they are just super solid. And then the final one that I gotta mention is one of Europe's own. Mezcal ends up getting 17th place with Ridley. He ends up losing to MK Big Boss in the winner's side, but he beats Winder, the Dr. Mario player, so shouts to Winder, that guy's very good, and Nader Yu before falling to Neroz for 17th place. So the low tiers were hitting this tournament. This next player I don't really have a segment for, so I'm just going to mention them, and that is going to be Pow. What an incredible run this guy ended up having. He played solo Pokemon Trainer, at least to my knowledge, and he got massive upset wins over both Nader Yu and Tarek before falling to Apollo, Kage, and Neo, respectively. Ends up getting 17th place, and I really appreciate that Pokemon Trainer representation. This character is still very good. Ivysaur has some crazy cheese. Squirtle is such a broken character, and Charizard's arguably the best character in the entire game at securing the stock. There's a lot of things going for them, and Pow demonstrated that extremely well this tournament, and I appreciate him for it. And there's two more invaders that didn't make top 8 that I forgot to mention. Well, didn't forget to mention. I'm just going to mention them now because the results are pretty good. You have MK Big Boss finishing in 9th place, which was his seed. He ends up beating Varavi. Mezcal and gets a really nice upset over Siski. And I should mention that every single player MK Big Boss beat, he ended up 3-0ing. So very dominant in all of those wins. And he loses 2 Game 5 sets to Kid and Nail. Was extremely close to top 8ing this event. And MK Big Boss at these European events is a different beast. He's just so well every single time, and I think he's going to continue having an amazing 2024. I just have a lot of faith in all of the Rob players, and they keep proving me right, so thank you, Rob players. And the other invader is going to be Apollo Kage. Slight underperformance from him, as he was, I believe, the 6th seed for this event, but 9th place at a major is still incredibly solid. He picks up wins on Eco, Pew, and Pow, only losing to MKLEO and Orion in a Game 5 set. That Orion set is very good. I highly recommend that you check it out. But every single tournament, Apollo Kage, it feels like he's just slowly climbing back to that summit. I think he has learned a lot from the Japan trip, and his play looks significantly better because of it. And I think the second that we see him in top 8s more consistently, it is going to snowball super hard, and we can see him winning these big major events. And I should mention the other 9th place finishers as well, because I just really like the runs. You're going to have Quick in 9th place. He's going to end up beating Art Sniff, Tom Berry, and Neros before falling to Raplo and Tarek. So he does benefit from the Neo upset, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Neo's run and the guy that upset Neo, but still incredible run from Quick. One of the best Samus players in the entire world. I would have him as the 3rd best Samus, but to be honest, it's kind of hard to make a top 5 Samus list because there are so many talented players of this character. But Quick has some of the highest peaks this character has ever seen, and he can be a little bit inconsistent, but when he is hitting, he's just an incredible player, and he was definitely hitting at this event, so massive props to him for the run. And Neroz is going to be the other 9th place finisher, using pretty much solo Pikachu. He did bring out the Palutena versus Quick in a losing effort, but he got wins on Longo, and most importantly, got a massive upset over Nails. So that's the reason that Quick didn't have to play Nails, because Neros ended up beating him in a Game 5 set. Then he loses to Quick, but he beats both Mezcal and Entei before falling to Bloom Forever. And this is the best Pikachu run we have seen from a player not named Shiny Mark in years. 9th place at a major is so incredible. Massive props to Neros, and I think we'll see more Pikachu players popping off in 2024, because I always think we'll see that. I just think the character is really good, but Pikachu is definitely a late game character. His combo routes are extremely difficult, and the way that you have to play him has changed so much since the early meta that I think people are finally starting to figure out, okay, if I'm camping a little bit more and I'm killing you off of one hit, then I'm going to start having success. And Neros clearly figured something out, because he was incredible at this event. And we have arrived at the top 8. If I left out your favorite player or an incredible run, just leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure to tell you how their run was. And while you're down there, be sure to sub if you're enjoying the content so far. But our 7th place finishers are going to be Tarek and Orion. Starting off with Tarek, as I mentioned earlier on, he ends up losing the Game 5 set to Pow, and I believe it was a reverse 3-0 from Pow, so even bigger shots to him from that. But then Tarek just goes absolutely monstrous, taking out pretty much all of Europe's best. He beats Super Sammy, Space, Leon, Flo, and Quick. What an all-star run from Tarek, and then he ends up losing to Neo once he gets into the top 8, but this is just so incredible. Another tournament where Tarek is cementing himself as one of the best players in Europe. I would easily have him in the top 5 for Europe at this point. This guy's just so incredible, and he keeps putting amazing results on the board, and we saw the Kazuya come out this tournament as well versus Quick. It ended up taking 3 of the 3 games that he took versus Quick. The Greninja lost the first one, and then Kazuya swept the rest, so that was really fun to see because I personally like watching Kazuya at the top level. The character is just very, very funny, and speaking of funny characters, you had Orion as our other 7th place finisher. Seeing a Wolf in top 8 was so refreshing. This character is so fun to watch, and Orion is one of the best Wolves to pilot the character. He ends up beating Yolt and Space before falling to Kid. Then he beats Itish, Maze Beans, and Apollo Kage. That AK wins obviously going to be the most impressive one of the best players in the world, and he managed to take him out before falling to Bloom Forever in the top 8. And beating AK is so impressive because he is one of the best in the world, but Snake is not a common character in Europe. There are very little Snake players, so to be able to have the matchup experience and just know the character well enough to beat arguably the best rep of the character, I would still have her as the best rep, but Apollo Kage is definitely high on that totem pole. It's just so impressive, and Wolf is a character that definitely has the tools versus Snake, but that doesn't mean it's going to be an easy win. And I should also mention that he ends up going Falco versus Basebeam to take a couple of the games, and the Wolf was the last character to close it out, but he's using all of the space he's at his disposal to get this top 8. Our 5th place finishers are going to be Neo and Kid, starting off with Neo. He's going to end up falling to Neros, as I mentioned, but he recovers his run super hard, being Spectral, Peanut, Pow, Andres FN, MK Big Boss, and Tarek before falling to Spargo. And it should be noted that he does end up beating Spargo twice at the pre-local, but it was a corn deal for those sets, and it was Cloud in the main bracket, and Neo just wasn't able to figure it out this time around. But Neo's had such an incredible start to 2024. He gets 3rd at Cafeteria Cup, 9th at Kowloon, 5th at Genesis, and now 5th place at King Kong. He's looking to be one of the best players in the world, arguably top 20 right now. Both him and Shadow are just showing people how dangerous Corrin is in the current meta, and it's been so fun to watch because I personally like watching Corrin. And Kid was easily my favorite run of the tournament because it allows me to push my Mii Brawler propaganda, so thank you very much, Kid. He ends up beating Modzai, Mars, Orion, and MK Big Boss to get into the top 8, and once in the top 8, he ends up falling to Rafflo and Bloom Forever, but he manages to take a game versus both of those players, and he just looked so incredible, and he really showcased why Mii Brawler is good. It's not because Mii Brawler has crazy combo extensions or the best neutral in the game, though his neutral is quite good. The reason that Brawler is so good is, one, yeah, his combos are incredible, but this character is one of the best 50-50 characters in the entire game. Whether it be Regan air dodge or reading a tech chase, if the Brawler player is correct, you are going to be dying at like 50%, and that's why I don't think you see Mii Brawler all the time, because he doesn't have any combos that are going to take you to 60% right away, and even though he has a kill confirm at 70%, it can be a little bit difficult to hit if the opponent is ready for it, but he has so many other ways to steal the stock. I saw Kid make great usage out of Nair into back air specifically, and I really think that this character is just starting to see the daylight. We're going to see even more Brawler results, and with this run from Kid, I would easily call him the best Brawler player in the entire world. Also, I should mention, as the name implies, Kid is like 15 or something, so another child prodigy we gotta look out for. In 4th place, you had Bloom Forever. 3rd place, Rafflo. Bloom picked up wins on Anvil, Peanut, and then Flo ends up DQing, as I mentioned. So technically he beat Flo, but not actually. And then he has a Game 5 set versus Spargo, and the 2 games that he ended up taking, he used Dark Pit. I don't know why Dark Pit was the choice, and I don't know why it works so well, but it was a very effective choice. His edge guarding was really good, his conversions were really good, and it's just another example of Bloom being one of the most fundamentally solid players in the entire world. But unfortunately for him, Spargo was arguably the most fundamentally solid player in the entire world, so the Pit wasn't able to eke it out this time around. Then he ends up beating Neros, Orion, and Kid, and has the run back versus Spargo. Doesn't try the Pit this time, but it's still another Game 5 set, all ages from Spargo and all Bayonetta from Bloom Forever. And this is massive progress from Genesis, where he kind of got mollywopped 3 over from Spargo. Both of his sets versus Spargo this time end up going Game 5 with a multitude of characters as well, which I think is super impressive from Bloom. And in their next encounter, I could definitely see him taking the set. If Bloom gets more opportunities to travel and just play against this top tier talent, I think he's going to benefit from it massively, and we're already starting to see him benefit from it massively with all of his results just being really good as of late. So shouts to Bloom for the run. But the highest placing European at the entire event is going to be Rafflo, the king of France, at least at this event, because Glutony was not in attendance. He ends up beating Lancelot, Entei, Quick, and Kid, and he does use a combination of Samus and Palutena, but towards the latter half of the bracket, it was pretty much just Samus, and he ends up losing a Game 5 set to MKLEO that he absolutely could have won, and a 0-3 set to Spargo. And I think that was his first encounter versus Spargo, so you honestly can't feel too bad about that one. And in their next next encounter, I'm very confident that Rafflo will do better. This guy's just so incredible. As I mentioned earlier with Bloom, pretty much the exact same thing. If he gets more opportunities to travel and just play against this top tier talent, he's going to benefit from it massively, and we're already seeing him improve so much. And in proof blog, Rafflo has actually played Spargo twice, but the first time was at the pre-local before this event, so basically hasn't had much time to figure it out. And the grand finals was entirely dominated by Mexico's Spargo in second and MKLEO in first. We'll look at Spargo's run. First, he ends up beating Astrat, Maze Beans, Leon, and Bloom Forever to get into the top 8. Once in the top 8, he loses a very competitive set to MKLEO Game 5. Then he beats Neo, Bloom Forever, and Rafflo to make it back to MKLEO, where he ends up losing once again. This time it ends up going Game 4. And Spargo's start to 2024 has been really good, but he just hasn't been able to get the W. He's got a third at Luminosity, makes big moves, third at Genesis, second at King Kong. These are all stellar results, but we're 2 months into the year, and Spargo just hasn't got his first major win yet. And it was kind of like this in 2023 as well, so I'm not at all worried for him. He's still definitely a contender to be the best player in the entire world. He just hasn't gotten that big trophy yet. But speaking of the best player in the entire world, it's MKLEO. He is back, baby. A flawless win from him. He ends up beating Solo, Rakior, Apollo Kage, Spargo, Rafflo, and Spargo once again. And this is a phenomenal bounce back after his pretty bad performance at Genesis X. And I was very confident that Genesis X performance was going to be a fluke because he just looked amazing at Luminosity, makes big moves. I don't know if it was the nerves from Genesis being Mr. Genesis himself or something like that, but he definitely re-cleared all of those problems at King Kong because he just looked incredible once again. His movement was so clean. The Joker is back, and if we get to see more from MKLEO with similar performances in 2024, he is going to be a contender for the best in the world again. I'm not going to call that quite yet just because it is only one major win, but MKLEO hasn't even been in the grand finals of a major since I believe it was Major Upset, where it was him versus Spargo, and before that, the last time that MKLEO won a big event was actually Genesis, so it's been over a year at this point, but it doesn't matter how long it's been. The GOAT is back with his massive win at King Kong, and I honestly couldn't be happier with that. I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the support. It's been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Be sure to sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.